Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video you will learn the core idea of Redux library without any additional complexity like for example React framework. So let's jump right into it. So what is Redux? As you can see here I am on reduxjs.org and here it is written that this is a predictable state container for JavaScript applications. And actually I really know Redux quite deeply, but this line doesn't bring any clarity, especially for beginners. Actually Redux is just a global container where we store all our data for front-end application. So normally when we are writing JavaScript projects, we have our data all over our application. So we don't have some specific place where we store them. We just create them, for example, in different components if we are talking about some frameworks or just on the fly. And of course it is nice to have some architecture where we store this data globally in a single global object. This is why actually the Redux is a solution, because we have a single global object and we know that from all places we can get access to this object and read the needed data. Also, when you start with building JavaScript applications and normally you have two different places in your project, they somehow need to communicate. And this is fine at the beginning when, for example, your module 1 is saying for module 2 that user clicked on some button and then module 2 needs to change something. But then you have this dependency between module 1, module 2, module 3, and then probably module 3 is calling module 1, and then it is really hell to support. And this is the second problem that Redux is solving for us, because we have a single flow of data and you will see it on the real example and you will understand why it is so good. Also, normally you are hearing word Redux only together with React, and actually it's not correct because Redux doesn't have anything together with React. Yes, of course, this is the popular solution for React, but you can use Redux with any framework or even without framework. This is why here in this video we will build together a simple example just in plain JavaScript with using of Redux. So let's get started. So here I already prepared a folder with two files, main.js and index.html. And inside index.html I have one important script. As you can see here, this is a CDN, so we are taking Redux of this version and load it in our index.html. And we have here our main.js where we will write our code. Actually, when I will open it in browser and reload the page, this script with Redux is already loaded. This is why here, globally, I have Redux object. As you can see, we have a lot of stuff here and we will talk about it in a second. Now, let's jump inside our main.js. So here is our main.js, it is completely empty. So the first thing that we need to do when we are working with Redux is create a store. The question is, what is store? This is actually an instance of Redux which has a lot of different functions inside. And to create store, we can use function Redux, as you can see here, create store. So exactly with this function, we can create our new store. This is why here I am writing that we are getting back store and we are calling here Redux create store. And we just call it. Now let's reload the page and see the error. As you can see, we are getting a warning, expected the reducer to be a function. What does it mean? Actually, inside create store, we must provide a reducer. And the question is, of course, what is reducer? So first of all, let's create a simple reducer and you will see what it is about. So here on the top, I want to create reducer, and this is just a function, and here I have as an argument state. What is important, I want here to set initial state, for example, to empty array. And now inside, I really don't do anything but just returning my state. And this is actually our basic reducer, and we are passing it here inside our create store. As you can see now in browser, we don't have any errors because we passed inside our reducer. So the question is now, what is reducer? As you can see, we have here two different words, store and state. And this is important. So store is the instance of Redux, which means inside we have a lot of useful methods that we can use to work with Redux. What is state? State is this global object that I already told you about, where we store all our data of our project. And in this case, on initialize here, we created our state as an empty array, which actually means we don't have some difficult structure there, we just store array of data, because we want our example to be super basic. And the point is that this reducer is a function, and the name reducer means that we reduces the value of our state. What does it mean? So normally our state is quite big, like a lot of properties inside, and then we can write inside this reducer some logic like if conditions, and based on some of this logic, we can return the part of our state. So actually the idea that reducer reduces our state and gets only the part of it. Now let's check the most important function that we have inside our store. So here I want to console log store.getState. So store is an instance of Redux. We have here always a function getState to get our global state. Let's reload the page. As you can see, our global state is just an empty array. Why is that? Because here I created our initial state and I said that this is only an empty array, which actually means in every place of our code we can, if we have access to the store, get our global state, so store.getState. This means that, for example, imagine you have 5 different modules and everywhere you can just simply say store getState and you get access to all data that exist in your application. This is really super simple and super convenient. But we can do even better. We can subscribe to our state. So here we just simply got the state once. So normally we want to subscribe for the changes inside our state in different parts of our application. So here I will comment this console log out and write store.subscribe, and this is also an important function, and inside we are passing a callback, which actually means this store subscribe we are writing in one of our modules. And this store subscribe will call this callback function, and here we can just move our console log inside, which actually means every time when we change our global state, this store subscribe will trigger, and here is our callback, and inside we get access to our global state. Let's check this out. I am reloading the page. As you can see, we didn't get any console logs. Why is that? Because yes, we subscribed to our store, but we didn't trigger any changes, which actually means that our store didn't change. This is why we didn't notify our subscriber. So actually this we can name module 1, so we know that we subscribed in our module 1. So we subscribe, we're subscribing to the changes. The question is how we can make these changes. And for this we have an additional function. So here, for example, we have module 2, which is store.dispatch. And actually dispatch is the function which triggers something. In our case, this triggers a user action. For example, user clicked on the button, this is dispatching of the action. User submitted a form, this is dispatching of the action, and so on. Which actually means here we must provide an object with type. And here we can write, for example, add user. So this is important when we want to change our global state. So this state that we created here, we must use store dispatch. There is no other way to change our state. And this is really nice because we have a single flow of data. And we have really nice architecture because we really can access and change our store only in a single way. In this case, store dispatch, and here we are passing our object. So why object? Normally, we want here to say what was changed, so what happened, and maybe some additional data. This is why we are passing inside object, and here we have type. So this type is really mandatory when we are passing it inside dispatch, because this type says for us and for Redux what is happening. This is why here we can write just a plain string. It can be not only capital letters, you can write here foo, it doesn't matter. The main point is that inside dispatch you always provide an object and it must have this type property. In other case it won't work and you will get an error. So let's check this out. I'm reloading the page and as you can see here we see our logs. So let's have a look. This is our log inside subscribe in module 1. We can write here that this is module 1, subscribe. And now when we reload the page, you can see that this is exactly this subscribe. What does it mean? In some place of our application, doesn't matter how deep your place is, for example in module 2, we can dispatch something for our Redux. And then in every place where we have this store subscribe, we are notified that our state was changed. This is why here we are getting this console log, and normally we want to get access to our state so we know what properties were changed. In this case, we can understand what was changed and render our application. The next question is what is happening with this store dispatch, because actually now it doesn't change our state and it doesn't do anything. So to understand this, we can write here inside reducer console log. But what we want to see here is reducer, then we want to see our state and we want to see an action. So now the question is what is action? Actually, this is the second argument of our reducer, and most importantly, the thing that we dispatched here, this object, is an action. So this means that we are always dispatching actions. And exactly this information is coming here inside reducer as a second parameter. So let's reload the page. As you can see here, we have quite a lot of logs. So first of all, we have our reducer, and here we have our state. This is empty array that I created here. But also we can see here action. And as you can see here, we see the string that we didn't do at all. This string is an action that is dispatched when Redux is initialized. This is why you can see here Redux and init. So normally you should not do anything with this action. And the second action, this is what we dispatched. So in our reducer, we're getting every time this console log when we're dispatching an action. This is why here, somewhere in our application, we dispatched action with type addUser, and this action got in our reducer here, and we can do something. This is why here we're getting first of all our current state, this is an empty array, and here we're getting full information of our action, in our case the object with type addUser. Now we can use this information to change somehow our state. In this case here we can simply write if condition, and here if action.type equals, and in our case it was addUser, then we want somehow to change our state. And let's return simply the new mocked array with word foo. So the idea is that here we are getting information regarding current state, so we know how to change it, and our action. And normally we are writing if else with this action type, because we know that inside every action we have a type property, in our case addUser. So let's check what is happening. So I reloaded the page, and as you can see now, inside this subscribe, we're getting back new state. What does it mean? So our module 2 dispatched this action. This action got inside our reducer here, and here it got in our if condition, and we checked, okay, this action is addUser, yes it is, then we're returning our new state. Which actually means that now we don't have the state empty array, but we have the global state array with the word foo inside. This is why all our subscribers, for example module 1, were notified regarding changes in global state. And to get these changes, we are calling store getState, and then we're getting our new state. But, of course, this returning foo here doesn't make any sense. So normally, if we are talking about real application, somewhere in our project we want to dispatch type addUser, so we created a new user and we need to update our state. In this case here, we actually want to react to this and change it. But as I already said, here inside action, we must provide a type, but we can also provide additional information. So here I can write payload and, for example, jack. So actually I can create here whatever I want properties, but it makes sense to name them everywhere the same. And the standard way of naming things is type and payload, which means normally we only have two things: type, which really says what action it is, and payload, where we store the information that is coming together with this action. In our case, we are passing this information name Jack. This is our user that we want to add to our state. This is why here payload equals Jack. Now, when we reload the browser, as you can see in Reducer, we have not only type, but also a payload. And now we can use this payload to modify our state. So here we don't want to return just foo, but we want to merge our current state and add at the end action .payload, which actually means this state is not always our empty state. This is our current state. And we just modify it and we return the new array here by merging our previous array and adding at the end action payload. So let's reload the page. As you can see in module 1 subscribe, we are getting now array with single element Jack, which actually means we dispatched an action with the name Jack and we added inside our reducer this name to the array. Now let's add one more dispatch to check that it is really working like we intended. So I will copy paste here store dispatch, and here we will have the same action add user, but inside payload let's use the other name, for example John. Now we reload the page, and as you can see our console logs are duplicated. So here we had our reducer with empty array, and here is our action, so add user payload Jack. And you can see that our module 1 was notified that we added a user because our global state was changed. Then, once again, with second dispatch, with this line that we added, we have additionally reducer call. Here is our state now. So as you can see, it's not empty array anymore. This is array with the name Jack. And here is our new action with type add user and payload John. And then we of course go inside this if and we merge together our state and our new element. This is why in our module 1 subscribe we are getting now two elements, Jack and John. So this is actually everything that you have inside Redux. As I already said, you don't have there a lot of magic, and actually the Redux library is less than 50 lines of code. But of course, when we're using it with React or with other frameworks, you have a lot of additional libraries and a lot of additional complexity and wrappers. So normally we have just create store, we have our global reducer, this is it, we have our subscribe everywhere where we want to, and we have our dispatches to change our state. But of course, with just plain data, it's not that understandable how our application will work. This is why let's create several DOM elements and check how all this code will fit our markup. So let's create, for example, an input, a button that will submit this input, and the list of our users. This is why I am jumping inside index.html, and here inside the body, first of all, I will create an input with type text, and here we can add class so we can find this element. So here we will have user input. So after an input, we need a button to submit our information. And here let's name it add user button. And here inside this button, we will have text add user. And after this button, we will have our UL list, and this is the element inside which we will render all our users. And here let's name it just list. So here I'm closing UL, and our markup is ready. Now let's jump inside our main.js. So here everything is fine for us, but first of all I want here on the bottom to find all our DOM elements. So first of all we need our list. This is why we're using document, and here query selector, and here we want our class list. I will copy paste this twice because we need two more elements. And second is add user button, and this is our button that we will click after filling our input. So here we have our class add user, and the last one will be const with user input. And here we will have query selector for user input. So now we have access for three our DOM elements, and we can add a listener for our add user button. This is why here add user button dot add event listener, and here is our callback. So we have here a click, and when we're clicking, what we want to do is make a dispatch. So actually I will comment out this code and this subscribe, and also remove here console log so we can check how our code with DOM elements is working. So what I want to do inside click is copy this store dispatch inside. So actually when we're hitting click, we're dispatching the action for our Redux. This is why here type is add user, but payload will be what is now inside our user input. This is why here will be user input dot value. So we're reading the value of our input. Now let's check if it's working. So let's reload the page. As you can see, we don't have any logs. Now we have an input and add user button. So when I'm typing something here and I'm clicking on add user, actually our action is being dispatched. But we don't see it because we removed here console log. So here I will console log state and action, so we can check it once again. I'm typing something, I'm hitting add user, and as you can see, here is our dispatch, type add user, and here is payload with my input value. Which actually means every time when we dispatch this element, you can see that our state is changing and we have more and more users. So what we want to do now is render this array inside our UL. So for this, I want to copy store subscribe here, for example, before our add event listener, but actually it doesn't matter. And what we want to do here first, we want to make our list empty. So list inner HTML equals empty string. Secondly, we want to make our user input empty. This is why user input value equals empty string. Now we need to read our global state, and we know that this is an array, and we want for every element of this array to create a li. And then we can append all these lis inside our UL. So let's try this out. I want here store get state, and this is how we're getting our global state. And we know that this is an array. So here I will use for each, and here we have access for our users. So this is why here I have a user, and inside I want to create a li. So here will be the li, and to create it I'm using document create element. And inside create element I'm passing tag name li. So here we created our DOM element, and now inside we want to write information regarding the user. So here will be li.textContent, and here will be our user, because this is just a string. And after this I want to append it inside our list. This is why list append child, and here inside I want to pass our created li. So once again, we want to empty list completely, and we want to empty our user input. Then we are looping with for each through our array, and for every element we create our li, then we set here user, and we append it to our list. So let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page, here is our input, I'm typing something and hitting end user. As you can see in DOM elements here, I can make it a little bit smaller. So inside body we have now our UL, and this is the li that we created with text inside. So let's make it smaller. Now we add one more user, hit enter, and as you can see our list was re-rendered. So what is happening? Every time when I'm clicking on this button, we're dispatching an action. And this action goes inside our reducer. We already have this code where we're adding this add user and action payload to the array, which actually means we're changing our global array. Now we have here store subscribe, and inside we can get access to this whole array at every place of our application. So we simply got back this array, and we rendered here for every element of this array new li element. So this was everything that you need to know about Redux library and how it is working internally. As you saw, there are like 5 methods that you need to know, but it gives us a really scalable approach and architecture. This is why it is commonly used across all front-end frameworks. Also, if you want to improve your programming skills, I have a lot of advanced courses regarding different web technologies, and I will link them down in the description box below, so don't forget to check them out. And if you like this video and you want more content like this, don't forget to put thumbs up to support me and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you in my next video.